big adventure, tons of fun. A beautiful heart, faithful and strong. Sharing kindness, it's an easy feat, and magic makes it all complete.
Capture the flag.
Oh, this is gonna be great. Hey y'all, Bertold the Weeb here, coming at you with a new spicy opinion about a new anime, The Goblin Slayer. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer, I'm still reading the manga series, and so far I do like what I see, and also as a fan of Berserk and of Warhammer, although I prefer the Horus Heresy era over the Dark Millennia era, this type of stuff is right up my alley. Now, when a buddy of mine that goes by the name of Zadoctor recommended me a new grimdark medieval fantasy with RPG style of fight scenes, I was immediately sold. So of course, spoilers ahead, because the content as well as some of the stuff we're going to be talking about has already happened in the first episode as well as even in the manga. If you guys haven't read the manga or haven't seen the first episode, I do recommend you guys actually read the manga first and then, see the first episode, because I don't want to sound like an elitist or anything, but at least in the manga, it provides a lot more depth into what occurred before these scenes that we are going to be talking about happened and what caused so much controversy and whatnot. So, like I said, without further ado, let's get right into the video itself. Now, when the day came and the premiere of episode 1 was out, I was super excited and stoked. However, I had to wait to watch episode 1 until about 2 days after, since I was finishing up an essay. However, the day after, and it showed up all over my newsfeed throughout the forums as well as even YouTube videos I was watching, there was already a lot of anger towards this anime and manga. There were a bunch of SJWs blowing their moral loads all over the forums. We got sites like Anime Feminists calling it a brainless copycat, longing to be Berserk, and then uses rape as an increasingly meaningless vehicle for cheap shock horror. And then we stumble upon this gem. This grammatical and sentence structure gem that is so in need of polishing. It pisses me off, basically. And it's not just because of that, but it's also because of the main idea behind it. And I quote, "Because of these kinds of male empowerment fantasies that view women as a collection of holes dragging a punchline behind them, because it can't even bother with being a lazy, rape is the only trauma we can think of to have women grow stronger from story." What? Male empowerment fantasy, viewing women as a collection of holes. This isn't 50 Shades of Grey, my guy. This is a story that is set in the medieval era. Although, yes, it is fantasy, it is still set in the medieval era. Now, I'm not some historian here, but I've done my fair share of research as well as taken plenty of classes in high school as well as in college of history, and I can tell you that in medieval Europe, as well as during the conquest of the Mongolian Empire, as well as the conquest of the Moors, as well as even the Arabs in the Middle East and North Africa, as well as parts of, Central Asia and of Europe, it wasn't a good time period to be a woman. It was god awful, and if I was ever in that situation and I was a woman and I knew that an enemy army is approaching because they destroyed our defenders in the field of battle, you best believe I am going to fucking KMS myself. So those greedy, horny bastards aren't going to have their way with me. And I'm not saying this happened, with only one soldier capturing one female. No, we had droves of enemy soldiers that did that. Dozens, if not hundreds of them did that. It was said that when Moscow ran out of vodka after beating the Nazis in Germany, it is also said that Berlin also ran out of virgins. Yes, that shit happened. And yes, it is god-awful and terrible. Many empires and armies, although different armies did practice different rules of engagement, that was still a commonality during that era. There isn't any innocence per se, only different degrees of guilt. Now, I'm not saying I'm desensitized or anything, it's just that this shit happened. Now, going back to Goblin Slayer, people were very, very upset on the controversial scene that happened to one of the characters, as well as a attempted rape on another character. And just to provide some context behind this, events that occurred while doing this quest, I believe that White Fox Studios, even though as poorly as poorly as they presented it in the anime, they didn't really do that bad of a job in the manga, but at least in the anime, all I really felt was, yes, shock, because of the terrible fates that a lot of these young heroes found themselves in, basically. Yeah, it is some shock value. However, the tone of the story shows that there is no bullshit. If you are ill-prepared, as well as ignorant of the situation, horrible things are going to happen to you. And the story, in whether it's the first and second chapter, as well as the first episode of the anime, I believe that it captured it very, very well. So let's get on to the scene itself. Our young heroes go into this cave because they want to save some women that were captured by the goblins. And our young heroes, as they are approaching the cave as well as entering the cave, drew many red flags in my mind as, they were talking, and having, a merry time. And the red flags, and I'll go through them rather quickly, were quite simple for any type of, engagement, basically. If you're in a military engagement, or wartime, whatever, it's simple. One, there's only one person that has a weapon that can deliver killing blows, as well as blows that are going to easily, take an enemy out of the battle. And that's his longsword. That was Leroy Jenkins' longsword. Now, his longsword, looking at it, yes, it is a sword, it is a bladed, weapon, object, whatever you want to say it. And yeah, it's going to be able to do those type of things. However, it's a longsword. And longswords aren't the greatest weapons to bring when you're in a very claustrophobic and close quarter combat scenario. I would have rather brought, maybe a dagger or a few, maybe a one-handed axe, a smaller axe, not like those two-handed axe, but at least a one-handed axe, a shield. I would have brought a shield or a buckler. What else? A short sword or an epee, something that is more better to use in a close combat scenario or battle, skirmish, whatever. Not a longsword. Armor, protection, none, basically. He didn't have a helmet. And I mean, I get it, like, oh, you don't want to have something that's going to, mess up your vision, especially when you're going into a very dark environment. Yeah, sure, then have a helmet that doesn't cover your vision. There are plenty of helmets that, do that, especially back in the day. There were plenty of helmets that did that. They offered the protection to the back of your head as well as the side of your head, while still giving you a very, very clear line of sight. There were helmets like that. no helmet. Great. And then other various forms of protection were simply thrown out the window. It's mentioned that he has killed a few goblins here and there, but they were individual goblins, weak foes. Similar to grunts in Halo, they are not that much of a threat when there's only one or two of them. Yet if you get a group of basically 4 or more grunts, it's a bit more of a challenge, especially when they're throwing plasma grenades at you or rapid firing their plasma pistols. It's just not good for business when you're going against a lot more enemies. Like zombies too, it's easy to deal with maybe 1 or 2 of them, but when you go against a whole horde of them, there's gonna be some issues. And he also mentions that they aren't very smart, as well as they only have the strength and size of a child. Now, if those little bastards are as the size of children, I would assume that I would have some more protection towards my lower body, because if they have any weapons, or if they're able to scratch me or bite me, they're most likely going to be able to do so basically anything below my stomach area. So yes, I'm going to have some shin guards, some knee pads, some thigh guards, and various other forms of protection. But of course, this wasn't planned. This group was new. They were ill-experienced. They didn't have any forms of money to pay for this said protection, as well as, buying any other necessary supplies that they might need in order to go and fight goblins. Then we have our other 2 adventurers besides the main character of the priestess / healer. We have Cheeks, the Asian Kung Fu master. Again, no armor, no weapons, not very good for business. And then we have the mage, the resting bitch face of an elitist mage. Again, no armor, and the only weapon that she, I guess, has is her staff. Now, as somebody who has played MMOs as well as RPGs, wooden staffs don't make the best of weapons, and at least for a lot of mages and, wizards and all and other various groups of characters that use magic, normally if you break their staff or damage it, their power goes down or simply gets taken away entirely. That's basically their battery. That's their source of power. So, again, no other weapons. Great. They go into the cave, and all hell breaks loose as the priest and the resting bitch face of elitist mage gets flanked. Now, instead of assessing the situation, there is a little bit of time to do so, we have Leroy Jenkins simply charge into combat wielding his longsword. Now, as mentioned before, or if I didn't mention it, as he pulls out his longsword earlier at the entrance of the cave, he hits the top of the cave, indicating as well as foreshadowing that this shit might happen once again in a time where it's not very good for business. Now, he does manage to take some goblins out. However, just as he's about to take another crushing blow towards the head of one of those bastards, the sword hits the ceiling, thus flying out of his hand, and he is quickly jumped by a group of goblins. Now, as mentioned before, maybe 1 or 2 of them, not much of an issue to deal with. However, when you have 6 or 8 of them clawing at you, biting you, stabbing you, as well as cleaving you, it's going to be a very agony-filled type of death. Now, a lot of people were upset because they were saying, well, his death wasn't, shown on screen as much. We saw some silhouettes and some, images kind of from the distance of him being cleaved, stabbed, bit, and scratched to death. But it wasn't to compare to what happened to our Cheeks female Asian Kung Fu master. Yeah, sure, I'll agree with that. However, the effect still, it was still there. His screams and pleas for help as he was getting cleaved, stabbed, and scratched and bit to death were still there. And yes, in the manga, you have to imagine the screams and sounds he's making as he's gargling and drowning in his own blood. But in the anime, I believe it captured it rather well. Now, instead of assessing the situation, Cheeks gets enraged and Leroy Jenkins herself into a group of goblins without even thinking that, hey, our tank / major damage dealer just got taken out by 6 of them. Yeah, let me go charging into 8 of them. It's going to work very, very well, because all I have are my kung fu skills, no armor, and no weapons. Yeah, you can kind of see how this is going to end. Now, as mentioned before, the tone of the story is very, very fucking dark, and you realize rather quickly that the goblins don't have any female counterparts. So, what do they use as a substitute in order to build up their numbers? Ah yes, female humans and elves. And it is quite disturbing on how they take down Cheeks, the Kung Fu Asian master. She gets stabbed to the point where she can't really fight back, and then these horny bastards start salivating all over her. And then the deed is played upon the screen for all those to see. Now, I understand the shock and awe of this scene being played right in front of you, but the priestess / healer, of course with her dying mage of a comrade, should have fucking ran off. Instead, they watch this event that probably is going to scar the priestess for the rest of her life occur right in front of them. And yes, it happens. Very, very bad things happen in front of her. And finally, she runs. Now, yeah, did this scene create any type of effect towards me? Did it cause me to get upset, rage-filled, disgusted? Yes. I wasn't like, oh yes, females are just holes for us to use, and yes, this is male empowerment. Yes, she's getting assaulted. No. No. I felt disgusted and rage-filled when this was occurring right in front of me. The effect that the anime studio as well as the manga artists put upon me, you know, the tone, the main tool of writing that's supposed to sway readers to feeling some sort of attitude towards their work, it in fact achieved that objective. I was horrified by the screams of the male hero when he was cleaved and stabbed and bit and scratched to death. I was mortified, disgusted, as well as rage-filled when our Asian Kung Fu master was assaulted. And then, to top the cherry on top, when the priestess is trying to get away, they are ambushed again by a few more goblins. And even though this poor mage, even though I did call her some names, is dying because of a stab wound that she got in her abdomen, they still try to assault her. Now, Goblin Slayer happens to walk upon this scene, and yes, he kills the goblins. Everything happens for a reason, and again, I'll go into more detail in the actual anime review, but at least he's able to kill those goblins and even entice a mercy kill for our mage. So, yes, the tone of the story was rather dark and no bullshit. And it shows that if you are in fact an ignorant and ill-prepared group, shit's going to happen to you. And another thing, for those of you guys that are trying to come up with an argument for the goblins, saying that, hey, they're just fighting for their survival, man. You're going into their territory, man. I say, bullshit. These goblins are literally parasites. As mentioned before, they need they need female elves and humans in order to reproduce. That's a parasite. Literally, scorch earth tactics are needed for these little bastards. So, I hope this opinion shines some light upon those who are, one, been swayed by clickbait, two, are not gonna give this anime and manga a chance because of said clickbait and not very, well-written articles that lack any sort of context whatsoever, are gonna give this a chance. Because I, for one, am going to give this series a chance. I already bought the first 3 volumes of Goblin Slayer. I do, in fact, am looking forward for episode 2 of Goblin Slayer. And if anyone has any other recommendations of any type of anime or manga that are similar to this, please do recommend them because I have an interest of these. I'm not a slice of life moe fan. I like the nitty-gritty controversial stuff. And what these people do not realize while they are trying to make these clickbait articles as well as videos, they don't realize that controversy is often a good thing because other people are going to go into these stories, look into these stories and animes and other various forms of, literature and entertainment, and they're going to judge it for themselves. For the most part. So, as mentioned before, I hope I provided enough context as well as some understanding of what is going on, as well as my opinion of the situation, and as well as the controversial scenes that happened in the first episode. I hope everything was in order. Now, if there are any things that I missed or things that I have to work on, please do include them in the comments. I am going to read said comments and improve upon my work due to those creative criticisms. And do expect the review episodes to start being pumped out once my midterms are over. So, that being said, I'll see you guys next week for a Goblin Slayer Volume 1 review as well as Episode 1 review. I'll see you all very, very soon. Thank you for watching.